If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it out of the woods. Or maybe I did, and the thing that wears my face is the one talking to you now. Either way, you should probably listen, because once you step foot in these trees at night, the forest already knows your name. I'm not supposed to be telling you any of this. There are rules, written, spoken, and whispered, that say otherwise. Break them, and the forest punishes you. Follow them too closely, and it still finds ways to sink its teeth in. I've tried both. Neither worked. That's why I'm talking now, before I run out of chances. My job sounded simple enough when I first signed on. Patrol the woods at night, walk the marked trails, keep an eye out for trespassers, vandals, or lost hikers. Report what you see in the logbook at the ranger station before dawn. That's it. No gun, no radio, no backup. Just me, a flashlight, and miles of black trees whispering things I pretended not to hear. At first, I told myself it was the perfect gig, easy money for long walks in the dark. But the first night I stepped onto the trail, I felt it, the weight of the forest pressing in, heavy as water. The silence wasn't empty, it was crowded. Crowded with eyes, crowded with voices I couldn't quite catch, murmuring my name like a secret they weren't ready to share. And the rules, God, the rules. Don't shine your light off the trail. Don't answer voices no matter how familiar they sound. Don't follow the lanterns. Don't leave the path, not for anything. They told me these with a straight face, as if they weren't insane, as if this was just part of the job. I laughed then. I don't laugh anymore. Because the rules aren't warnings, they're bargains. And bargains mean something here. Every step I've taken since has proved that. I've seen enough to know there's no leaving once the forest decides it wants you. You think I'm exaggerating, don't you? I wish I was, but I need you to understand before I go any further, I don't think the forest is going to let me leave. Let me take you back to how it started. I wasn't looking for anything glamorous, just something that paid the bills and didn't involve customer service. I'd been bouncing between jobs for months when I saw the posting. Night patrol needed, woodland preservation project. Steady pay, flexible schedule. It sounded harmless. Walk around the forest at night, keep an eye on hikers and trespassers, fill out a report. Easy money, right? At least that's what I thought when I called the number. The man on the other end had a voice like gravel and sleep deprivation. He introduced himself only as Reynolds. No first name, no title. Just Reynolds. "You'll be patrolling the Pine Arch Reserve," he said. "Quiet place, not many visitors after dark. You'll mostly just be making sure the trails stay clear. That's all." I asked about pay. When he told me the number, I had to stop myself from laughing. It was more than I had made in any other job, especially one that didn't require a degree. I tried not to sound too eager when I asked if there were any catches. That's when his tone shifted. "There are a few conditions," he said, and I swear I could hear him flipping through papers. "Standard safety measures, no firearms allowed, no radios either. Don't deviate from your assigned trail after dusk. You'll be issued a flashlight, batteries, and a logbook. Record anything unusual in detail." "No radios?" I repeated. "What if I run into, I don't know, a bear? Or someone dangerous?" "You won't," he said flatly, "and if you do, you'll know what to do." It was the way he said it, like he knew there was a script he wasn't allowed to go off of. I laughed, thinking maybe he was trying to spook me. "Sounds mysterious," I joked. "You'll get used to it." That was all he said before changing the subject. The in-person meeting wasn't much different. The ranger station looked official enough. Wood-paneled walls, framed maps, a faint smell of dust and coffee. Reynolds slid the contract across the desk with the kind of expressionless stare that made me wonder if he'd already seen 100 people before me come and go. I skimmed the paperwork. Most of it was standard, liability waivers, timesheets, but then came the clauses. No firearms, no radios, no leaving the trail at night. Always complete the logbook before sunrise. There was even a line about not bringing personal items onto the patrol. No charms, no religious symbols, nothing that could
interfere. I looked up at Reynolds. This is specific. He didn't smile. We found it helps avoid problems. What kind of problems? The kind you don't want. For a second, I thought about walking out. I mean, who hires someone to wander the woods at night and then tells them not to carry anything protective? But then I thought about the rent check sitting on my kitchen counter, the overdue bills, the empty fridge. A paycheck was a paycheck. Fine, I said, signing my name. When do I start? Reynolds tucked the contract away, his face unreadable. Tonight. That should have been my first red flag, but I told myself it was nothing. Just a job, just walking in circles until the sun came up. And yet, as I left the station that evening with my flashlight and logbook in hand, I couldn't shake the way Reynolds had looked at me, like he knew something I didn't. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. Rules were rules and jobs were jobs. I didn't understand why they emphasized them so much. Now I wish I had. Because when the sun went down and I stepped on that trail for the first time, I learned the forest had its own set of rules, ones they hadn't bothered to write down.
The first night, I told myself it was nothing. The trail looked ordinary enough, dirt packed down by years of boots and bike tires, framed by tall pines that rose like cathedral pillars into the night sky. The air smelled of pine needles and damp soil, crisp and almost sweet. When I tilted my head back, I could see a sprawl of stars clear enough to make you forget the world had problems at all. For a little while, it was almost peaceful. My boots crunched softly on the path, and the only sound was the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. I thought about how ridiculous Reynolds had sounded with his rules. Don't answer voices? Don't shine your light off the trail? It felt like a campfire ghost story. But then I heard it, just faintly. A whisper. At first, I thought it was wind passing through the trees, but the longer I listened, the clearer it became. Not words exactly, just a hush, like someone breathing too close to my ear. I froze, sweeping my flashlight across the trail, and the sound stopped instantly. The silence afterward was heavier, almost accusing, like I'd interrupted something. I muttered, "Okay, that's creepy," and forced myself to keep walking. A few minutes later, I noticed movement. Not in front of me, off to the right, just beyond the edge of my light. A pale shimmer, like a lantern swaying through the woods. For a split second, I considered stepping off the path. Maybe it was a hiker. But then the rule flashed in my head. Don't follow the lanterns. So I stayed put. I turned my light toward it for half a second, just long enough to see nothing there. No glow, no person, just trees. I remember laughing nervously, telling myself it was a trick of my eyes, but my laugh sounded too loud, too brittle, like it didn't belong in that silence. When I got back to the ranger station that morning, I opened the logbook. Most of the entries were boring. Wildlife sightings, notes about trail conditions, but a few stood out. Scribbled handwriting, rushed and uneven. Don't stop if you hear them. Keep moving. The lights are not for you. If it knows your name, you've already lost. I read that last one 3 times, trying to shake off the chill it sent down my spine. By my 3rd night, I wasn't laughing at the rules anymore. That's when I met another patrol guard. His name was Marcus. At least that's what he said over the short-range radio they finally gave me. "First week?" he asked, his voice crackling through static. "Yeah, you?" "Don't worry, it gets easier." He sounded almost casual. Almost. Then, after a pause, he added, "Unless it's one of those nights." "What do you mean?" I asked. But before he could answer, the signal cut out. Not a fade, not static, just gone, like someone had pulled the plug. I tried hailing him a few times, but nothing came back except silence. That was the night I stopped telling myself it was in my head. the whispers grew bolder. I'd walk past a grove of trees and swear I heard my mother's voice calling my name from the darkness. Not her exactly, but close enough to dig under my skin. Another time, I swear I heard a child crying. Every instinct screamed at me to go look, to help, but the rules were clear. Don't leave the path. So I didn't. I kept moving. Every step felt heavier, like the forest was watching to see if I'd break. I wish I could tell you I never broke. But the truth is, I almost did. Because one night, I saw it. Not a lantern, not a shadow, not a whisper. It. I can't tell you what it looked like. Not because I don't remember, but because the memory isn't solid. It's like trying to recall a nightmare after waking up. Pieces slip through your fingers the harder you hold on. I remember the shape of it. Too tall and too thin. I remember the sound it made, like branches creaking under invisible weight. And I remember the way my flashlight flickered when it moved, as though even the light didn't want to touch it. I'll say this much. Once you know it's there, you stop thinking of the rules as suggestions. They're the only reason you're still breathing. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't just walking trails at night. Something was walking with me.
There are two kinds of nights on patrol. The first kind is the boring kind. You walk the trail, log a deer sighting, maybe hear an owl hooting in the distance. Your mind wanders. You think about bills, groceries, or what you'll eat for breakfast when your shift's over. It almost feels normal, mundane even. And then there are the other nights. Nights when the air feels too thick, like breathing through cloth, when the trees lean in a little closer than they should and every sound carries the sharp edge of intention. Those are the nights when you learn why the rules exist. It started with footsteps. Not mine, these were behind me, crunching in sync with my own until I stopped walking. Then they stopped. When I started again, so did they. I spun around, light cutting through the dark, and of course there was nothing. Just trail, trees, and the hollow stillness of the woods. Great, I muttered to myself. Stalked by an invisible forest roommate. Love that for me. The footsteps came back. Closer this time, and I forced myself to keep walking. The logbook entries echoed in my head. Don't stop if you hear them. Keep moving. So I did. One foot in front of the other, pretending like I couldn't hear the crunching that shadowed every step. Then came the voices. The first was my dad's. He's been dead for years, which is why hearing him call my name from the tree line nearly stopped my heart. It wasn't just his tone, it was the exact cadence he used when I was a kid and stayed out past curfew. Sharp, low, disappointed. I clenched my fists and cut my eyes forward. The next night, it was my sister. The night after that, an ex-girlfriend. The forest had a talent for choosing people whose voices dug hooks straight into my chest. And every time, the urge to answer clawed at me until my throat ached from silence. One night, though, the forest got lazy. I heard a voice, too close, too desperate, and I almost turned before I realized it wasn't mimicking anyone I knew. It was just generic, like a bad actor reading lines. "Help me," it said, flat and unconvincing. "Please, I'm lost." I laughed then, a brittle sound that fogged in the cold air. "Nice try," I whispered. "Get a better script writer." That humor carried me through, but I noticed something shift after that. Like it knew the trick hadn't worked, and now it had to try harder. And it did. The next week, I started seeing things. Shadows standing at the edge of my light, thin and wrong. They weren't people, but they wore the shape of people. They stood too still, like mannequins waiting for the cue to move. Every time I raised my flashlight toward them, they slipped back into the dark. One night, I caught one leaning half out of the trees, its head tilted at an angle that made my stomach knot. I told myself it was a branch, a trick of the light. But then it grinned. I didn't see teeth, just the impression of a grin stretched too wide. "Perfect," I muttered. "The forest wants to kill me, and I didn't even get health insurance." Figures. Humor was the only thing that kept me from breaking. If I didn't laugh, I'd scream. But jokes only go so far, and I wasn't laughing when I went back to the logbook. I told myself I was just curious, that I wanted to see how many others had dealt with the same things. But I found something I wasn't supposed to find. Buried between routine entries and cryptic warnings was a page written in a different hand. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, as if scrawled under duress. Don't let it know you're afraid. Don't shine your light at it directly, and if you see the one with the antlers, run. I read that line over and over, and with every pass, my stomach dropped further. Nobody had ever mentioned anything about antlers. Reynolds sure as hell hadn't. I wasn't supposed to see that page. I know, because the next night it was gone, torn out clean. But I remembered it. And maybe that's worse. Because the following patrol, I saw something move between the trees. Too tall, too thin. And as my light flickered weakly across the dark, I can't swear to it, but I thought I saw the outline of antlers catching the faintest glimmer of starlight. That was the first time I nearly broke a rule. My hand twitched toward the tree line, toward the thing watching me. Every instinct screamed to shine the light, to prove to myself it was there. But at the last second, the logbook's warning came back like a slap. Don't shine your light at it directly. So, I didn't. I walked faster, heart thundering, pretending like I couldn't hear it tracking me. But pretending doesn't change the truth. And the truth is, once you've read what you weren't meant to read, once you've seen what waits just beyond the trail, there's no going back. The forest doesn't forgive curiosity, and I was about to find out just how bad I'd screwed up.
I shouldn't even be telling you this. The logbook isn't meant to be shared. Hell, it isn't even meant to be read cover to cover. It's supposed to be a tool for recording patrol notes, nothing more. But when you're alone in a ranger station at 3 a.m, with adrenaline still buzzing through your veins, you start looking for answers anywhere you can find them. That's how I discovered the hidden entries. Most nights, I'd flip through and find the usual. Dates, trail conditions, maybe the occasional wildlife sighting. Routine stuff, boring enough to lull me into a false sense of safety. But sometimes, tucked between the neat handwriting and the mundane notes, there'd be something else. Pages scrawled in desperation, tucked into margins, squeezed between lines like whoever wrote them didn't want them seen, but couldn't resist the urge to confess. The first one I found was a warning. It doesn't matter how many flashlights you bring. The dark isn't empty, it's waiting. Another, the forest doesn't forget. Don't think you'll be the exception. And then there were the confessions. Half-mad ramblings about how patrol wasn't a job at all. It was a test, a culling. The forest decided who stayed and who left, and once it chose, there was no arguing. One entry stopped me cold. It wasn't dated, and the handwriting was almost illegible, jagged like it had been written in a shaking hand. If you hear the bell. That was it. The sentence cut off mid-stroke. Pen marks dragging across the page as if the writer had been pulled away mid-word. I stared at it until the ink seemed to blur. The bell. What bell? I didn't want to admit it, but my gut told me the page was gone because someone didn't want me to know the rest. Someone, maybe the same they, who hired me, was covering things up. That's the part that eats at me. This job isn't just about patrolling trails. It's about containment. About keeping the truth locked inside these woods, hidden under vague contracts and unspoken rules. They don't care about my safety. They care about keeping the forest's secrets quiet. And now I've read too much. I can almost hear you scoffing through the screen. Maybe you think I'm paranoid, that I've just been out here too long, breathing in too much pine and shadows.
I'd like to believe that too. But tell me, how do you explain entries written by guards who never signed out? How do you explain warnings in handwriting that looks half erased, like the page itself was trying to swallow them whole? The truth is, I think every guard eventually ends up writing their own confession, and then they disappear. Their words are all that's left. Maybe that'll be me too. Maybe these are my confessions. I don't know why I'm still writing, or why I'm telling you this when every fiber of me says I shouldn't. Maybe it's some pathetic attempt at survival. If I vanish, maybe at least someone out there will know what happened. Maybe you'll take it seriously. Maybe you'll understand the rules before it's too late. I'll tell you this much. The rules don't explain everything. They're just placeholders. Things to keep us alive long enough for the forest to make up its mind. And lately, I've started to wonder what happens when it decides. Because last night, while I was logging another entry, I thought I heard something. Faint, far away, almost like it was buried under the earth itself. A low, resonant chime, cutting through the silence in single notes. A bell.
The first time I heard the bell clearly, I thought it was coming from inside my own skull. It started faint, like a hum at the edge of perception, a vibration more than a sound. Then it grows sharper, a single heavy toll that carried through the trees and settled deep in my chest. It wasn't mechanical, no chime of iron or steel, but something older, resonant in a way that made the air itself feel heavy. I froze on the trail, flashlight beam trembling over the dirt path. For a moment, I convinced myself it was far away. Then it rang again, closer. If you hear the bell... The unfinished logbook entry crawled its way back into my mind. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to keep walking. The rulebook didn't say what to do, only hinted. And rules weren't guidelines here. They were lifelines. But that's when the trails started to shift. I don't mean I got turned around. I mean the trail itself moved. I'd walked the Pine Loop a dozen times by then. I knew the twists and slopes by heart. But suddenly the bend that should have led back toward the ranger station opened into a stretch of trail I'd never seen. The trees leaned closer, denser, as if the forest had rearranged itself while I blinked. I checked my map. It didn't match. North, south, east. I turned the paper until my hands shook. Every direction was wrong. "Marcus?" I whispered into the radio, voice cracking. "You there?" Static answered. Then, faintly, his voice. "Yeah, I'm here." "Where are you?" "Trail's different. It's changing." There was a pause. Then, "Don't tell it you noticed." The line went dead. I stood there in silence, heart hammering, every hair on my body prickling at once. Don't tell it you noticed. Who was it? And what did noticing mean? That's when I checked my phone. No service, of course. But there was a new photo in my gallery. Handshaking, I opened it. It was me. I was asleep on the forest floor, head tilted back against a tree, my flashlight rested beside me, its beam cutting a pale stripe through the dark. I don't remember taking it. I don't remember sleeping, but the timestamp was from less than 10 minutes ago. I nearly dropped the phone. My stomach twisted as I scrolled. More photos waited. Half a dozen, all from angles that suggested someone was standing just out of sight, watching me. Some showed me walking. One showed me smiling at nothing. And one showed me standing on the trail with my eyes closed, mouth open as if I was listening to something no one else could hear. I backed away from the phone screen like it could bite me, but of course it followed me in my pocket, heavy as a stone. After that night, nothing felt stable anymore. The trees leaned in ways they hadn't before, their silhouettes twisting into shapes that seemed deliberate. Sometimes the stars overhead blinked out for a moment, like the sky itself was breathing.
And the bell kept tolling. Always once, always closer. I started to wonder if Marcus was even real. Sometimes I heard his voice crackle over the radio, but whenever I pressed for details, asked where he was, what trail he was on, the line would cut. Once, mid-sentence, he just vanished, his words swallowed by silence. I don't know what scares me more, the idea that Marcus is another guard trapped here like me, or that Marcus is just another voice the forest wears when it wants me to listen. I don't sleep much anymore. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see myself standing on the trail in those photographs, eyes shut, listening for something I can't hear when awake. And if the trail changes itself, if the map is worthless and the station keeps moving, then how do I know I'm really on it now? How do I know I've ever been?
I told myself I was done. I packed my bag in silence, stuffing the logbook beneath a change of clothes, and left my key on the ranger station desk. No dramatic goodbye, no note. Just the thought, walk away, drive, don't look back. For a while, it worked. The forest road stretched clean and familiar beneath my headlights, winding toward the highway like it always had. Each turn brought me closer to the hum of civilization, the promise of neon gas stations and late-night diners. My chest loosened for the first time in weeks. But 20 minutes later, the headlight swept over something that froze me in place. The ranger station. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles popped. I'd driven straight. I knew I had. Yet there it was, same porch light glowing, same shadowy tree line at its back, waiting. I tried again. Different route. I counted the minutes, the curves, the landmarks, and still, inevitably, I came back. The station squatted there like it had been expecting me. I drove until the sky lightened at the edges, then darkened again. Hours became a blur, the clock on my dash refusing to tick past midnight. My gas gauge never budged, needle pinned stubbornly at full. I wasn't escaping. I was circling. Once, while barreling down a stretch I didn't recognize, I saw a cabin tucked between the trees. A faint light burned in the window. I slowed, heart hammering. Someone else? Another patroller? But the closer I came, the dimmer it grew, until there was nothing at all. Just forest, endless and unbroken. That's when it sunk in. I wasn't the first. Others had tried. Maybe some had left things behind. Cabins, lanterns, ghost trails that flickered into being before vanishing again. The forest held on to them the way it now held on to me. When I finally staggered out of the truck, I was back at the ranger station. My bag sat on the porch where I dropped it. The door creaked open in the wind, like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. That's when it hit me. The forest didn't just want to keep me here. It wanted me to replace someone.
I've stopped counting the days. At first, I tried. I marked little scratches into the logbook cover, lined them up like prison tallies. But the lines blurred, pages bent, and soon the scratches didn't look like mine anymore. They looked older, worn, as if I'd carved them years ago. And that's when it clicked. The entries I'd been reading, the desperate notes, the half warnings, the "if you hear the bell" scrawled in broken handwriting, they weren't written by strangers. They were written by me, or by the version of me that came before. This forest doesn't kill, not in the way you think. It folds you into itself. It rewinds you, rewrites you, threads your words back through the paper, until the next poor bastard thinks he's reading someone else's final confessions. I flip through the logbook now, and it's all here. My voice, but not my memory. I've been here before, hundreds of times maybe. Each patrol, each rule, each futile attempt to run, every thought I thought was mine has already been written. And the forest laughs. Not in sound, but in silence. In the way the trees lean closer when I write. in the way my own pen scratches ahead of me sometimes, finishing the sentence before I know how it ends. I shouldn't be telling you this. I shouldn't be giving the forest another mouthpiece. But maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why the logbook never burns, never disappears. It's the bait. Because someone has to read it. Someone always does. You. That's why I've been talking to you like this, like a confession whispered across the dark. Because if you're still listening, still reading, then the cycle's already chosen its next thread. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're safe, that this is just a story on a screen. I told myself that once too, that I was separate, that the job was just a paycheck, just a gig. But the forest doesn't care about contracts or excuses. It cares about names, and it already knows yours. I can hear the bell again, faint, steady, like a countdown. I don't know if this is my final patrol or my first. Doesn't matter anymore. The path is waiting. The lantern is lit. If you take this job after me, understand this. The forest won't test you. It won't warn you. It will already know your steps, your voice, your face. I told you the forest won't let me leave. Now it's your turn to walk the trail.